Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Harris, and I'm from NPEC, and you are all here for an NPEC presentation. It's the third and final part of our foundation series. This is probably one of my favorite ones. What is socialism? You know, the thing that we hopefully all want to achieve in the world. But if you check out our YouTube, by the time this one's up, the others will be up as well. We have the two other parts are what is capitalism, that was done by Professor Sanjeev Gupta, and then what is the working class, which was done by Ashik Sadiq. And check those both out. They're great. Check out all the other videos up on the DSA YouTube channel. And if you didn't know about it, subscribe, show us all the love and all that good jazz. So right now, instead of, wasting any more time listening to me, you're all here for Megan Romer, one of DSA's two national co-chairs. And so I'm going to pass it off to Megan. Megan, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Tonight we will be discussing, or will we? Yes, an introduction to socialism. One of my favorite things to introduce as one of the national co-chairs of DSA, which is the largest socialist organization in the country. I am obviously a fan. This is my full-time job. I do socialism all day, every day, and I really like it, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it tonight. I am going to try to make sure we're kind of boiling down some complicated concepts into ones that are understandable, but I have the chat open. I am watching. If I say something that you're like, what does this mean? And I don't like immediately say, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Please tell me. I want to know what I'm breezing past too quickly. This is a presentation for you. So I want to make sure you're getting what you need to get out of it. But yeah, let us heli forth into the breach once more, old friends. Okay. So or God, there we go. Amazing. So most people find out about socialism because they read the entire collected works of Karl Marx in German and were like, yeah, this rocks. I'm a socialist now. Okay, no, that is not, in fact, how most people came to socialism. I have not read any Marx in German because I do not, in fact, read German. I have read some Marx, though, so nobody worry. Most people become socialists because of one issue, right? They usually become socialists because of something they specifically got mad about in the news. That is the primary thing that makes people become a socialist. So they're looking to fight for racial justice, fight for universal healthcare, housing, labor rights, ending wars, etc. All these things on here. That's what brings them to socialism. And then once, oh, I see. The pictures come in second. Sorry, I'm learning how to use Google Slides just now, even though I've been using them since the pandemic started 5 years ago. Okay. We can't have things like racial justice. We can't have things like universal health care within the system that exists. Why is that? Anyone have any guesses in the chat? I mean, it says it on the screen. It's capitalism now. We can't have it within the capitalist system, right? Because as you start to think about these things and you realize how interconnected they all are, that's when you realize that it is actually a systemic problem. It is not, it is capitalism. It is not just one issue. So when, despite the fact that most of us became socialists because of some specific thing that made us really mad, often you realize really quickly that that thing is connected to a bunch of other things and you can't actually fight just one thing at a time. So what in the heck is capitalism and what is so problematic about it? Let's find out. Is it working? God, fancy slides. There we go. Okay. I promise I know what I'm doing. So capitalism is a socioeconomic system. It's based on private ownership of the means of production. We're going to talk about the means of production in a minute. You do not need to know what that means yet. Okay. So it's a socioeconomic system, which means it governs both society and the economy, which are interconnected things. Capitalists specifically are concerned with the production of commodities. It is important to know what commodities are. They're goods and services that are produced for the purpose of being sold in a market to make a profit. So basic necessities, things like food, housing, healthcare, childcare, these are commodified and produced for profit rather than to meet people's basic needs, right? So under capitalism, we have to buy food. In a lot of states, you have to pay taxes on your food. You have to pay for childcare. That is not a free thing. You have to pay for your housing. So all these things that you need literally to live, you have to pay for, and they are commodified, which means that they are sent into the market for market competition, such as it is. All right. So let's talk means of production. This is very important, this meme. I am a big meme fan, so I'm sorry in advance for all the ones you are going to see tonight. So the idea of the means of production within socialism it's really important. It's critical to understanding what socialism actually is. So we're talking about the resources and assets which produce goods and services within a society. So in other words, the economy. Examples might include businesses, land, natural resources, tools, machines, banks, and so on. So I just want to stop for a second and let's think about it. So in your daily work, what means of production are you controlling? Maybe you work at a coffee shop and it's the espresso machine, right? The espresso machine is a means of production. The shop itself is the means of production. The cash register, the pastry case, all those things are parts of the means of production. Yeah, the Excel spreadsheet. Maybe you drive a tractor. Maybe you push imaginary things from one column to another. Work has gotten really weird. Maybe you sort the scary numbers, right? The scary numbers that give you a bad feeling. You sort them. I hope somebody gets that joke. But it's important to think about what means of production you control. Thank you, Max. Because that is how we think about our specific labor and how we are actually going to change this. I have one of the only jobs in the country where I am like actually a socialist for work, and that is very wild. So I do still use various tools and things though that are means of production. So that's where we're at. So because capitalists are driven by their bottom line, they are always going to choose profits over what society actually needs, right? That's why low-income housing isn't built. It's not as profitable as high-cost luxury housing. Insulin, it's out here costing $300 on the market, even though it only costs $2 to produce. Fossil fuel production, the world is on fire. Let's keep fracking. Grocery stores throw food away. People are going hungry. They cannot give it away because it would not be profitable and it would drive down the cost of the rest of the food. So a capitalist society is incompatible with a just world because capitalism cannot and will not just do things to be nice. We cannot have a just world in which everybody's needs are met and sustained, and we're keeping each other safe from disasters, and human existence is not a commodity to be bought and sold without eradicating capitalism. So yeah, just quick, maybe pop off in chat. What are a couple of other human needs that are not met under capitalism that you see maybe in your everyday life? Rest. Oh my God, yes. Transportation. Yeah, we have to have a job so that we can buy the food, but you have to buy a car in order to get the job. Right. Medical care, health care. That's true. We do not have government issued cat girls. Thank you. Physical activity. You have to pay for a gym membership if you want to do anything other than take a walk. Clean water, clean air, cities you can walk around. Paying for parking at your job. Yeah. So we will talk a bit more about some other forms of this later, Stephanie. So don't worry, we'll touch on that. But yeah, I just want you thinking about like capitalism will not solve this, right? Capitalism will not make it so that we have capitalism got rid of trains. Trains used to be profitable because they let the capitalists move their commodities around and move workers around. But then it became more profitable to sell everybody cars. So like literally we can't even have trains anymore in a lot of cities because the way the city itself has been built, you can't take a train out to the weird sprawling shopping center, right? So we're stuck and we have to actually like rebuild the very infrastructure we are living under. So okay. So what is socialism? I'm gonna do the annoying thing. Webster's dictionary, Wikipedia defines socialism actually fairly successfully, pretty quick. It's political, social, economic philosophy encompassing a range of economic and social systems characterized by social ownership of the means of production, which we just learned about, and democratic control that's very important, such as workers' self-management of enterprises. No single definition encapsulates the many types of socialism. It is worth noting that DSA is a big tent socialist organization, so you can be all kinds of socialist, and there is a home for you in DSA. And we work through some of those contradictions together. How are we going to fight? What are we going to fight for? What is our horizon? But social ownership is the common element, and we believe that workers deserve the right to own the means of production and to control their lives and have democracy in every aspect of their lives, not just at the ballot box where we barely have democracy anyway, but we'll talk about that in a minute too. All right. A quick little important definition time. If you were on the previous iterations of these calls, you probably heard a bunch about the working class, but I just want to go over it really quickly. So on the one hand, under capitalism, there are capitalists. That's called the bourgeoisie, right? Fancy French word, love to use. It's the word we get bougie from. Very, very important word to know. These are the people who own the means of production. It's the bosses, it's the landlords, it's the politicians. And then there's the rest of us, the other 99% of us, the workers, the tenants. And we define tenant in DSA as anybody who does not control their own housing. So if you do not own a house, we consider you a tenant, which can mean you are unhoused. It means it is the definition we use is that you do not control your own housing. So all tenants, anybody who's poor, anybody who's exploited, that's the working class, right? Because they lack ownership over the means of production, because we lack that ownership, we are unable to produce our own subsistence. So instead, we sell our labor power, we sell our bodies, or our brains, or something that we are able to do to those that own the means of production in exchange for a wage. We have to work for our paycheck. We have to work for the capitalists on their terms. Just want to note that the working class includes everyone who has to work for a wage to survive, but also all of their dependents, as well as anybody who lacks ownership over the means of production. So the unemployed, the unhoused, the incarcerated. Capitalists use their legal right to own the means of production to extract the value that we create with our labor, paying us less than the value of what we produce. That is exploitation, definitionally. Under capitalism, the capitalist class is in political control. Here in DSA, we sometimes refer to them as the ruling class or the boss class for that reason. But we conceive of a political system where they're no longer the ruling class. Under capitalism, as it is, the working class has no real political say. All right. Let's answer the question we all came here to find out. So what the heck is socialism? So here it is. This is a bullet pointed version of the Wikipedia article. So the working class in political control. The economy is planned so that it is providing for human needs rather than generating profit. So that's going to be things like we are producing medical equipment and not 900 different varieties of emoji stuffed pillows or whatever like weird thing they're selling on Temu today. There's true democracy, which is not possible under capitalism. We'll talk about that a little bit more, because the minority maintains rule over the majority. Under socialism, political power and ownership of the means of production belong to the working class. Nationalization, the politics, the polity, the body owns it all and gets to control how we divvy stuff up and what we make and where it goes. Human needs such as housing, education, food, healthcare can be provided for free or very affordably. All right. So to simplify, nothing makes me feel more communist than doing the math on the actual worth of my labor. I can buy a cake that takes me 10 minutes to make with 2 hours worth of my wages. Many such cases. It is sometimes really horrifying to stop and think about like what a couple hours buys you, to figure out how many hours of your week you're spending on what you pay for in childcare. I'm a mom. When I had my kid, and he's like 15 now, so he doesn't really need much. But when he was little, I had a bunch of mom friends, and one of them told me that her childcare costs were more than her income, but she still paid for it because she knew that if she was out of the workforce for a couple years, she wouldn't be able to get more jobs. Like that's the kind, and she was lucky enough to be able to afford to do that because her husband made more money. And you know, so this is the kind of thing that capitalism forces us into, these like bizarre, like crooked decisions where we're just like doing the most fucked up stuff because capitalism will always prioritize profit. All right. So bringing it back in, socialism is a socioeconomic system built on meeting human needs rather than profits. This here is a picture of Cuban doctors. Socialism puts human needs in the driver's seat for the economy, in contrast to capitalism, which, as mentioned before, is driven by the profit motive. So capitalists claim that their system is the only one that can innovate, that can increase quality of life. It's blatantly false. It's been proven false repeatedly throughout the world. Because capitalism prioritizes profits, needs like healthcare are ignored or squeezed for as much money as possible, right? The famous, they charged me $8 for a Tylenol in the hospital stories. Meanwhile, we do not need to debate tonight whether or not we agree with the type of socialism Cuba is doing, but they are a socialist nation. And they have more doctors per capita than anywhere else on earth. And their average lifespan is longer than the United States. Also, notably, the Black maternal mortality rate in Cuba is like 30% less than the United States. Because, you know, poor Black women don't turn a profit. So why take care of them properly in our healthcare system? So Cuban doctors, love them. So let's talk about a theory of change for a minute. So when we're talking about socialist theory of change, the profits and wealth of the ruling class come directly from the exploitation of the working class. If they paid you as much as you were worth or didn't profit off exorbitant rent, their businesses wouldn't be profitable. So the ruling class's political power stems directly from their access to these profits and that wealth. Without us, there are no profits. In other words, their power comes from us. So we don't gain power just by having the best ideas, because we can all say this all day long, and like you can say it even in mixed political groups, and people are like, yeah, I agree with you, but class struggle, which we're going to talk about again in a minute, recognizes that the only way to instill change is through active struggle. Power only cedes itself to a greater degree of power. We win by making conditions so intolerable for the ruling class that they would rather give into our demands than continue to live with the disturbance we cause. until we are able to fully seize power ourselves. So the ruling class's reliance on us for their power gives us incredible leverage if we can use it properly. They need us. We don't need them. We cannot, nor should we, wait for this to spontaneously happen on its own. History does not show that that happens. Fractures open, you can take advantage of them, but capitalism doesn't just decay into nothing on its own. It just decays into fascism, which is hyper-capitalism, right? It's not better. If we want to win, we need to be organized. We need to be working toward a shared vision. So we believe in DSA in building our organization into a party. The idea of a party is not the same as like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party in the US. Think more globally. Think about parties like PT in Brazil or MAS in Ecuador. A party as an instrument of the people, a militant, organized, democratic organization that serves to organize the masses into collective struggle. And collective struggle, again, it can mean a lot of things. It can mean general strikes. It can mean shutdown of various industries. It doesn't have to, I think people hear the word struggle and turn immediately to a more sort of historically militant outlook. We believe that there is a possibility of shutting down the country just with our labor alone. So the party should attempt to be the credible leader of the working class, to help to guide them toward unity and eventually to take that power from the capitalists. We can talk about it more later, but that gives you some broad strokes. So let's see. Okay. So the direct relationship between profit for the ruling class and the exploitation of the workers means that there is a direct contradiction between the interests of the two. So the contradiction is that the material interests, which is the goals and actions that benefit and enrich the ruling class, are in direct opposition to those of the working class. As the exploitation of the working class continues to intensify, which it is, we are in a period of intensification, the capitalist class becomes richer. I don't remember the number, but how many new billionaires popped up during COVID lockdowns? It was like a deranged number. They become richer, they become more powerful. The richest man in the world right now is dismantling the Department of Education. It is a very weird time. So a decrease in the overall level of exploitation of the working class can only happen at the expense of the wealth and power of the capitalist class. That's why Amazon, for example, will not recognize unions in their warehouses. They're incredibly hostile to it. And then Jeff Bezos takes like his other thing, which is the Washington Post, and is like, oh, well, we're only doing free market op-eds now. Like that's how this works. That's how this happens. This is how this will continue to happen. They know this. They know that we have power. So they want to do everything in their power to make sure the workers don't have power. The contradiction that exists under capitalism leads to an inherent struggle between the two classes. This is called class struggle. You've probably heard that term a bit if you're talking about socialism. Class struggle cannot be resolved while the capitalist system continues to exist. Capitalism is premised on a class that owns the means of production and is able to exploit another class that doesn't own that lacks that ownership and power. As the exploitation intensifies, the working class will struggle against it. Okay. So contradictions like this one and the class struggle that it's generating are what drives historical change. As the working class struggles against capital and fights back against its own exploitation, history unfolds. This contradiction cannot be resolved under capitalism, so we have to replace capitalism altogether. Only by smashing capitalism can we end our collective exploitation. There is no kinder, gentler capitalism because it will always continue to decay back into more people hoarding more wealth. Capitalism runs on collecting more, betting on the future, and exploiting further. We'll talk a little bit more about how we can take on some of that struggle later in the presentation. But we have seen some interesting struggles during recent years. One that comes to mind is tech workers in Silicon Valley refusing to create software for ICE. That's an things happen. Things are happening. I am of the always nothing ever happens caucus, but things are happening quietly, bubbling up. Important to note, class struggle, not just economic, it is political. Democracy is a sham under capitalism. It's a lie, right? We know this recent example, right? We didn't get to vote for who ran in the Democratic primary or who ran in the Democratic on the Democratic ticket for the election. There was no primary. We didn't get to make that vote. We didn't get to make that choice. In a lot of states, people can't vote at all for various reasons. There are things like voter ID laws. There are things like felon disenfranchisement. And then a lot of people can't vote because they are denied the knowledge and information and resources to be able to understand what voting means. It's a mess. So most decisions that are made in this country are made by a large unelected bureaucracy, or the richest man alive just being given a whole new government agency. They serve the interests of the corporate status quo. Even elected decision makers aren't usually as beholden to their constituents as they are to their donor class. The donors are who make the decisions. Our politicians, our constitution, our laws, court systems, police, they are all controlled by and serve capitalists, not people. So we can see this in how our elected officials, for example, continue funding Israel, even though a majority of voters oppose it, or how the Supreme Court, not elected, made abortion illegal, even though a majority of Americans support abortion rights. We are not actually living in a democracy by any real stretch. So democracy is not just voting, okay? Democracy is much more than just voting, and it's important to think about what that could look like as we're conceptualizing a new and better society. So I would love for you to pop off and chat a little bit. What are some ways democracy could look beyond just voting? And I am certainly not saying that we shouldn't be voting in a socialist system. There are just other ways to participate in democracy. What could that look like? Yeah, workplace organizing for sure. Boycotting, sure. Unionizing, absolutely. Employee-owned firms, totally. Direct action, yeah, no, direct action totally counts. Like the system actually changing when all the direct action happens is a big one, right? Housing co-ops, yeah. One, mutual aid, of course. Abolition of lobbying, yeah. So that's a big one, right? So one thing that I really would like us to get at is just publicly funded elections would change a whole lot. And the fact that the people who would have to make that change are the ones who are getting paid off by corporate lobbyists means that that's not a super realistic change without a massive systemic overhaul. I also like to look at the example of very inspirational and worth Googling. I'm not going to go too far into it, but Cuba, sorry to be so Cuba pilled. I promise I've heard of other countries. Cuba is, they recently, I think 2 years ago, passed something called the Family Code, which was an amendment to their constitution. And in order to, and that amendment specifically legalized gay marriage, covers trans healthcare under and gender affirming care of all kinds under their state health system. In order to make that change, they spent years, like decades, I think, of doing what we call consultative democracy. So they would go out, so they would go out and they would have these town hall style meetings, right? In every neighborhood, in every little community center, just everywhere that they had a space, they would cram a bunch of people in, they would show them what was drafted so far, talk it out, and then bring it back up and bring back up all the notes, and somebody compiled them all and made another draft and then sent it back down. And they did this repeatedly for years. And in the process of doing it, they not only came up with something that passed with like 70% of the public vote, but also built a lot of the necessary buy-in for this to be taken seriously and to be accepted. And that's really inspirational, and it's really interesting to read about. So I recommend go look up Cuba Family Code process or something, and you'll find some stories about it. So there are a lot of ways that we can think about how democracy could actually work beyond just once every 4 years at the ballot box. So let's talk a little socialist history real quick. So have there ever been organized socialists in the US? Yes. This is not an alien tradition. The experience most people have with socialism in the US is that it's this like evil, scary thing. It's un-American. It's cruel and terrible, and it's just a thing that no racism, but it's these other kind of people who do it. No, it's not. There is a grand American tradition of socialism. What you don't hear about is the rich socialist traditions that have existed in the US that were then repressed by the iron fist of the capital state. So not only do we have a rich socialist tradition, but it is a bloody and scary one. And much of the history has been erased or hidden or kind of softened at the edges or propagandized in all kinds of ways. So mainstream history, the kind you're mostly going to learn about in school, has a vested interest in not telling you this. Its purpose is to prop up the status quo. So just a couple quick examples of socialist activism across the US. You probably know that May 1st is International Workers' Day. That's an American holiday. It originates from a strike in Haymarket Square in Chicago, where they were fighting for an 8-hour workday, which ultimately they won, but a lot of people died. The incident turned violent after police attempted to forcibly disperse it, and a bunch of workers lost their lives. The Haymarket martyrs are buried at a cemetery out on the inner western suburbs of Chicago. And every time I go to Chicago, I try to go visit, leave a little something. It's very inspirational. And there's also a bunch of other random socialists, communists, anarchists who are all buried in the same cemetery. The Haymarket were there first. The Haymarket martyrs were there first. And then everybody else wanted to get buried by them because they were so inspirational. And it is referred to as the communist plot, which I think is great. Eugene Debs, presidential candidate from 1904 to 1920. He helped found the IWW. He ran his presidential campaign from prison. He was the first presidential candidate to do so. And unfortunately, the last could have happened again, but everybody's cowards. The Cold War's series of armed conflicts from like 1890 to 1930, miners took up arms against the brutal oppression they faced. They faced down the US military and the cops and the Pinkertons, and they were the first Americans bombed by the US Air Force. So special congrats to them on that big first. The Black Panther Party was a Marxist-Leninist Black liberation group focused on class struggle, on self-defense, uplifting the Black community in areas they operated in through policies like the radical free breakfast for children program. So, of course, the FBI and the Chicago police shot and killed one of their leaders, Fred Hampton, in Chicago when he was 21, as well as a bunch of their other leaders. Some of them are actually, I'm doing it again. One of their leaders was Assata Shakur, who is in exile in Cuba to this day, and is often cited as a reason that we're not allowed to open up trade with Cuba because they're harboring dangerous criminals like an elderly woman. Okay, so it is very important to note, though, we don't need to get caught up only in whether or not socialist movements have existed before in the US, because socialism is international. Even if socialism was a new concept, it wouldn't matter. Socialism is an international movement which seeks solidarity with the working class across the world. We are just one part of the global proletariat, and we share both common interests and a common foe, our exploiters, the capitalists. Many people say that we are in the belly of the beast because the US capital system is the biggest. It's the biggest empire that's ever existed. But but if we want to be good socialists in the heart of the empire, we need to be in solidarity with these people around the world. One of the key phrases of the socialist movement is "workers of the world unite," right? We've all heard that from Uncle Carl, right? We can learn so much from our comrades abroad. We can find similarities in struggle and solidarity through that. If we ignore what has been attempted and achieved by socialist nations around the world, we risk missing out on key opportunities, or worse, falling into the same mistakes. So that brings us to one of my own favorite topics. Let's see, I'm doing the thing. Scientific socialism. Okay. Nope. Okay. Scientific socialism is the approach of using evidence to inform our practice. So it doesn't mean we're doing science like burning cool stuff in a lab. We're just thinking about the scientific process. We study things, we learn from them, we iterate, we analyze historical and current conditions, we choose a strategy based on that analysis, and then we assess how effective that strategy was. We are not practicing socialism in a vacuum. There are centuries of past socialist theory and practice that can be used to inform our work, and those are global. There have been a lot of socialist experiments, some of which no longer exist, but nonetheless made major gains for the socialist project, and some of which still exist today. We don't need to start from square one. We can, should learn from and build on the socialist work that came before us. This will keep us from fruitlessly pursuing paths that have not worked in the past and help ensure that we are as effective as we can be. If we want to build a successful socialist movement, whose ultimate goal is to change the course of history, we have to be able to correctly understand and interpret the world around us. So these are some questions we might look at as we're analyzing other socialist projects, right? What has worked in the past? Why did it work? What hasn't worked? Why did it fail? What can we learn? How is our current context similar to or different from historical contexts where people organized for socialism? Wait, there's at least one more. How can we apply lessons from other contexts to our unique organizing terrain? And it is unique. And do we have any preconceived notions that are not supported by the evidence? So this is really important. These are important questions to ask ourselves as we are thinking about other socialist projects. Also, an important question to always ask is, what was the CIA doing? Because usually it's fucking up the project is what the CIA was doing. They love to do that. That is a primary thing that they do. I really recommend the book, The Jakarta Method, if you're not familiar. Washington Bullets is another great book. You hear a lot, well, such and such socialist project failed. And it's okay to say, like, why did it fail? And the answer is often because the global forces of capital, which are, best encapsulated in the CIA, messed it up. And yeah, so it's I can type it in the chat. It's The Jakarta Method, yeah, by Vincent Bevins. Very good book. Okay, so I'm gonna do the scary thing. So we're gonna talk about one of the scary, big, dense phrases, because I'm not scared, and I don't think you should be either. Let's just talk for a second about historical materialism, because it is really important. If we want to build a successful socialist movement, we have to be able to correctly interpret the world around us. The socialist view of history is very different from what we learned in school. What the socialist view of history is that society is made up of conflicting social groups with distinct relationships to the economy and the state, right? The different social groups, we call them classes generally. These groups organize together to advance their shared class interests. Society progresses through the conflicts between these classes and the changes that result from their struggles, right? So we talked a little bit earlier about the contradiction between the capitalist class and the working class and the class struggle that results from it. This is called historical materialism. It's one of those big phrases people are like, I don't exactly know what that means. This is all it means. It means that development results from the tension of opposing forces. That is the dialectical way of looking at it. I'm not trying to make you an expert here tonight, just give you some broad strokes, but this is a concept that you can understand and should not be afraid of, and is really important. Yeah. All right. So let's just try it for a second. Let's try to apply historical materialism, and the sort of more traditional American view, we often call it great man theory, right? So it's like, all of our current problems are caused by Reagan, as though Reagan was just this one guy. He was just one bad guy, and didn't have these huge social forces around him that were the full capitalist class trying to contract and shut down every social service program they could find. I'm not saying Reagan was good. Reagan was a bad guy. And there's a lot to be said about the existence of leaders and the way leaders can move a class. But where we're actually seeing the motion is in the class struggle, in the capitalist class versus the socialist class, pushing against each other in ways that are, kind of grinding and violent. So let's just talk about it. Let's try it, because it's fun to try things. So let's talk about the American Revolution. Who organized or led the American Revolution? That is a question for you, chat. Who organized it? Yeah, white landowners, American slaveholders, elite, wealthy aristocrats. Yeah, younger brother fail sons who couldn't hang in the British aristocrat class, right? Came here, started plantations. The bourgeoisie, right? So that's what class they belong to. So how does their class explain their politics? So we've got this bunch of like rich people or landowners. Why would they rebel against a king? A king is also rich. What's not cool about that? Shouldn't they be bros? Yeah, they identified an opportunity to break from Britain and establish a layer of abstraction to preside over. Yes, absolutely. Taxes ate into their profits. They wanted more because capitalism always wants more. That's how it works, right? You have to, it is competition between the capitalists themselves is a fundamental part, and they always need more. They wanted to expand further west. They wanted to preserve their local power. The king extracted their wealth. How dare he? There were like rumblings that the UK might like ban slavery. Like, how good would that have been? Not great. More money than you could ever spend and more power than you could ever use. Yep, absolutely. So how does this differ from other views of history? Like, what did like third graders learn about the Revolutionary War? Yeah, it was a moral majority. It was just. It was all about freedom, right? Founding fathers. The underdogs, freedom of religion. Oh, we love freedom of religion. Ew, British people. Okay, well, that one's fair. No taxation without representation. Yeah, we victimize them. Yes, those poor Boston Tea Party guys. They were taxing their tea so much, it was awful, and they had to throw it in the harbor. That's right, Hamilton. That's right. Which Hamilton is actually an interesting example of like when we're talking about like what is a progressive liberal view of something versus what is a socialist view of something, right? So Hamilton does mix up the narrative a bunch. It centers one of the less less wealthy, less powerful members of that, and it mixes up the obviously the racial narrative and all that. But it still ultimately kind of deifies the founding fathers, right? And even it has some, I think it has some like nods to the idea that this is not a moment, it's a movement, like kind of stuff. But it doesn't actually explore the class politics of the issue, or certainly the class struggle of the issue. Okay, so now let's do the next part. Dun, dun, dun. So let's apply historical materialism to a significant current event. I'm just give you a second to read the meme because it's a very good one. Carl, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm sorry, it's so funny. I just really love memes. It's my most millennial trait. Okay, so let's talk about the current sort of iteration of what we're hearing a lot, right? We're still hearing the orange Cheeto, right? The Cheeto man, bad, one bad guy. And that is, the sort of liberal or even progressive liberal take on what's happening now. Orange man bad. The historical materialist interpretation is not orange man good, right? That's not it. It's just, how about the millions of people who voted for Trump? How about the God knows how many millionaires and billionaires are just absolutely raking it in, despite the fact that like people can't afford. We joke about like the price of eggs and milk, but have you bought them lately? They're very expensive. Do you have kids to feed? It's expensive right now. Gas is expensive. Everything's expensive. So yes, I'm happy to provide memes at the end of the call. Sorry to break from that. We are very likely headed into a severe depression sometime pretty soon, because that's what happens. Homelessness went up 18% last year, right? So all of these things, Trump is not this one single bad guy, right? He's a symptom. And I think that's really important. So yeah, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about historical materialism to Trump getting elected again. What happened? What would a historical materialist look at that election be? Trump is the useful idiot. Yeah. It's shock doctrine. Yep, absolutely. Who's getting rich? Everybody who's already rich. The Trojan horse, American isolationism, and the fall of mask of liberal democracy comes from the rise of global South labor and industrial power. Absolutely, which were previously exploited for primary resources to satiate the working class of America with exploited value, up to and including literally the batteries that run Musk's cars that made him a zillionaire, right? Like you can't have those so-called green batteries without a literal enslaved child digging them out of the ground for you in South Africa. Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit more. We're almost out of time, but talk a little bit more about, so because we are looking at this with this historical materialist lens, instead of orange man bad, muskrat bad, those are the only two bad things, and if we can simply make them go away, we win everything. What does that tell us, and how does that inform us? How does that inform what our path is forward? Sorry, I asked that question really weirdly. If your answer is that there's this bad guy and he has a couple bad friends, and we could simply just depose them or ruin them with the Mueller report or whatever, so that's going to be a more traditional kind of great man theory of history. Since we don't believe that, how does that change our interpretation? Yeah, so that's a big one, Nelson. So if you think things are bad just because Trump is in power, that means you're ignoring when they're bad when it's not Trump in power. Corporations own both parties. Yep, we lead a general strike. Absolutely. Somebody's got to lead it, right? Assisting comrades abroad and breaking the weaker chains of imperialism through material support. Yeah, absolutely. Organizing ourselves to take power back from the capitalists, right? That's what what this tells me is that our pathway forward is to organize as socialists with a clear-eyed view of the way that society is structured and how it has to change, and move forward together, because together is the only way we have power. We're not going to beat them with money, because that's literally no, we could all put all of our money together, even with the one or two friendly-ish billionaires. Come on, Beyonce, throw it in. Um, but we still wouldn't beat them with money because it's not possible. Um, yeah, change is driven by organizing from below, not concessions from above. Power only concedes to greater power. And the only thing we can do is organize ourselves to make their lives miserable, right? To make it so that they can't make the money they want and they can't have the power they crave. We should be learning from earlier socialists. We should be learning from socialists abroad. Um, Good planning, good systems, and good people make the world of difference for change. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we only have 3 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions that they want to bring up in the chat? Or anything else? This is my last slide, and I'm leaving it up because the meme is so good. Yeah, I just want to pull out what one of the Jeffs said. Feel like treating the revolution in America as a guarantee following Trump is dangerous, right? Capitalism, again, will not concede. It will not die on its own. That won't happen. What it'll do is decay into the most horrific forms of fascism, and life will get so much worse, but it is not going away. Um, that won't happen. So we have to organize to end it. So that is what we are here for. And yeah, I think Michael can probably speak more to this. But I suspect some resources will be coming your way if you are a person who registered for the call. Um, and yeah, uh, Stephanie, I think we should be able to send you some stuff. It's okay that you're socialist light. When I joined DSA, I was just a regular John Stewart liberal who just was really frustrated because I didn't see the Democrats doing enough. And organizing changed my mind. Seeing the way that we have power when we organize together is what developed my politics. Not not just reading. Reading's important, but that's not where I develop my politics. Yeah. So yeah, Michael should be able to send, and I can send over some text or an email also, but and I believe this will be on YouTube. And there are always more NPEC events, National Political Education Committee. If you, I bet Michael can put the link in the chat. And there are, yeah, more things coming up, always new things coming down the pike. So yeah, that's it for me. How do we organize at a small scale? That's it for me. But then I see a question and I'm like, ooh, shiny object. How do we organize at a small scale with the idea to grow that organization? That's the only way we can do it, right? We build power by using power, right? We build power by showing something with just a little power that we have that we want, and then forcing a little bit of power to concede to us, and then we just keep building it. So some of what, there is an open question in socialist organizing over whether, for example, if we do a I don't know, a municipal public power campaign is a big one, very popular right now. So you're organizing for public power, you maybe win, and hey, your local energy system is now publicly owned. That rocks. And then it's democratically controlled. Is it still worth doing the campaign if you probably won't win that campaign? And the argument is that it's worth it because you get to go out and you talk to people and you agitate and you get people into your organization so that you can win something. Um, there's also the idea that in the winning, if you do win, you agitate that many more people toward your point of view. There are some different sort of ways that we think about this. Is it about agitating? Is it about um, action? Is it the wins themselves that build the socialist power? It's okay to not have the answers to that, and that's getting pretty subtle anyway. But the way we win, we all pretty much agree, is we have to do stuff, and we have to get bigger, and we have to get more powerful and better at doing this. And you took a big first step tonight by taking a course, and sort of getting yourself polishing that theoretical knowledge you have and understanding that you have. And yeah, I'm really excited that you did it, and I'm excited to have been able to do it with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. Yeah, so we can send out additional resources for everyone. Um, that may take a little bit just to get that. Especially want to make sure that we have stuff tailored for folks that maybe on the fence. I post in the chat also our DSA YouTube. Right now, the What is Capitalism, the first part of this series, is up. We should be getting What is the Working Class up soon as well, which is part two. And then this will be part three, which will be up hopefully sometime this week, if not next week. And yeah, like Megan was saying, if you're not in DSA and you're on this call, join DSA, because like all we got is each other, right? It's that's how we beat the capitalist class. But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight, and hope we all see you again for more events later. Thank you. Peace.